well, which for the sake of this presentation I'm going to call regional ones. Slightly different ball game there. Typically volunteer membership organizations, pretty informal governance. Mostly it's local ISPs rather than sort of backbone tier one type people that have got together. Consequently lower traffic volumes. As I say, there's lots of them. The two that are physically closest to where we are today are in Pittsburgh and in Columbus. And these are the ones I'll talk about a bit more later on. Again, global perspective on the regional internet exchanges. There was kind of second wave of these in the late 90s after the national and international ones had set up. Some examples that I've been involved in, Manap in Manchester in England, Shotix in my hometown of Edinburgh in Scotland, the HHPIC Hamburg in Germany. And quite often there was a sort of motivation behind these, which is that there's far too much centralisation of the infrastructure in this country. Let's not have all our traffic going down south to London and back. Let's stuff it up and open it in a local exchange. Again, not just the tier one guys, much smaller, more universal participation. Quite a lot of local government kind of jumped on the bandwagon there. It's like, oh well, we've missed out on the dot-com boom, but we can catch up if we just have our own internet exchange. That's a blessing and a curse. Again, say a little bit more about that. But really, like a lot of things that boomed in the late 90s, not all of these survived. Okay, a little bit about the non-technical stuff, the commercial and governance models. Neutrality is really very important. The whole point of internet exchanges is one place in the region or the city that you go to connect. If you get several of them in the same city, then you have to go to multiple of them, and then it costs more, and then you've lost the advantage. So they're kind of a natural monopoly. Which means, of course, that whoever gets to control this monopoly is in a position to abuse it. So there's lots of risks if you don't set up the governance right, that it's not neutral, that there's abuse by one party or conflict of interest. There's some principles there. Successful internet exchanges, they're generally not owned or operated in-house by a single ISP or carrier. That's not to say there aren't examples of it working perfectly well. They're not transit providers. They don't resell IP connectivity to the rest of the world. They only enable connections between their participants. And they're not national or international backbone. Quite in less developed internet markets, Middle East, Asia Pacific, there are quite often things called the BLA Internet Exchange, but actually they're not internet exchanges. They're actually the national PC telco has got a monopoly on internet transit, and they're calling it that because they can. Colocation, the actual building you're in, having that neutral is pretty important as well. In Europe, as I say, there's independent commercial companies who are purely in the business of providing space. In the US, they're tending to run the switch fabric as well of the exchange. But again, that doesn't have to be any less neutral. One place, carriers do a lot of colo, sell space to the customers. The idea of putting an internet exchange inside the telco jail is just one that's not at all popular. A bit more about neutrality principles. You don't have to comply to all of these to have a successful internet exchange. If you don't comply to any of them, you won't have a successful internet exchange. What works is very much tailored to the community that it operates in. But don't keep your members, treat them all the same. Don't get into the business of long distance or international backhaul or carriage. Don't go into exclusivity with various parties. To say, don't be a wholesale ISP. Don't step over the line of being on a wholesale ISP by sharing in somebody else's revenues. Don't connect outside the metro area. Confine for the service that you have to just the colo sites, and don't get into the business of running local tail to every building in the city. Being in multiple colo sites is usually okay, but that can be politically quite sensitive. And again, previous speaker was talking about differences between Germany and the US, and we had no problem. Well, we had some problem connecting our sites together in London, but the German exchange operators, I know, have had a very long battle in getting out more than one site. There's lots of different models that apply. In Brussels, Lisbon, Catalonia, the National Academic Network runs the Internet Exchange, and that works mostly fine. I've talked already about the not-for-profit membership organisations. That's by far the most common model. I've talked about Links in London. Another very large and successful one is AMSIX in Amsterdam. I think the most successful North American membership exchange is Seattle. Or the commercial providers. Another model is you actually have a company, but the shareholders are some of the exchange members, like the MIX in Milan or the JPIX in Tokyo. I have this principle which I apply, which is that the internet survives on a balance of competition and coordination. Too much competition and you get a whole lot of proprietary standards, nothing interoperates. Too much coordination and you finish up with monopolies and centrally planned economies which stifle innovation. I think this applies to governance models, the environment internet exchanges work in. There are advantages and disadvantages. Commercial ones can be very flexible, which is something new. We don't have to take the members in order to get authorization to engage in a new project. They can maybe ride some of the short-term market blips a bit better, but there's always going to be pressure on them to be less neutral, to go after the revenue opportunities. Non-profit ones work very well, but they do need a certain critical mass to be viable. Volunteer ones, well, they don't use a lot of resources, but they can sometimes be a bit opaque. How do I join this exchange? Oh, well, you have to try and track down this guy who's impossible to reach, whose name's not on the website. And they're captured by, maybe one volunteer will do so much stuff that they feel it's their personal property, or they're also subject to just apathy. Nobody can be bothered volunteering. They've all got day jobs. Public sector ones can work very well. Again, they're less common. There is a monopoly danger there. There is a danger of them being hijacked by political influence. Okay, so you've heard the first part of the talk. You think, well, one of these internet exchanges, maybe I could have one of these. How do I could be cool. How do I go about setting one up? First step is you've got to have some critical mass. An internet exchange with one ISP at it is not really any value. Experience suggests that 5 is the magic number. If you get less than 5, then it's probably not worth doing. It won't necessarily be self-sustaining. And of course, because all these people will be in the same physical location, they will potentially be in the same market, they will compete with each other. Depending on how cutthroat that competition is, getting people to trust each other in an environment like that is not easy. Generally what you need to do is you need to get all the technical people in the room together and sort of lock up all the salespeople, and then you can usually identify common benefits that will get people to trust each other and get the thing going. Quite a good idea if you're setting up a membership organisation, association, have some kind of memorandum of understanding that everyone signs up. If you're starting a commercial exchange, you're running it as a company, the principles are a little bit different. You can use like discounting strategies. The first 5 people get it for free, the second 10 people get it for 50% off to encourage people to come on board. And that can work reasonably well. But as I said, I think the focus is get the traffic moving first. An internet exchange that doesn't have a traffic graph on its website is not a real internet exchange because it doesn't have any traffic. It may have some wonderful website with all this stuff about governance and all the wonderful events they've had, but if they're not actually shifting packets, it's not real. Do that first. You're running an ISP, you want to connect to an internet exchange. What do you need? Well, the key thing is you need your own autonomous system number. And that's something that you need. If you're taking transit from more than one ISP, you connect to more than one upstream, you need an AS number anyway. You need your own provider independent address space. By far the most straightforward way to that is to get that. Not for everyone, is to become a member of an internet registry. Body that does that is the American Registry for Internet Numbers. They're meeting in Montreal over the next few days. South and Latin America, it's LACNIC. Europe, it's RIPE-NC. There's 2 or 3 others. Other thing you need is Box can do BGP. Most Cisco and Juniper routers just do this out the box. You can buy kit from other vendors. I'm not so sure that their BGP implementations are completely up to scratch, but if that's an issue, there are some good open source Unix BGP implementations. Software like BGPD, Quagga will certainly do it. You need to put Box into a colo facility where there is actually an internet exchange. Once upon a time, it was really expensive, and you had to spend like $10, $20, $30,000 to connect to Internet Exchange. These days, you can buy the box off of eBay. You can get personal polo space for $50 a month, something like that. And you know, some people have strange hobbies. My strange hobby is I run my own AS. Just to prove it, here's the entry from the RIPE database, which says what my routing policy is in terms of what other AS I connect to. And so, as I said, it's a slightly strange hobby, but it's within the means of most ISPs these days to connect to an exchange. So basically, you want to set up an Internet Exchange. It's not rocket science. People have been doing this for ages. Lots of help available. Good resources. EP.net website lists all the Internet Exchanges in the world by continent. Packet Clearinghouse, they're a great organization, non-profit based in California. They do a lot of outreach work to developing countries to help them set up their Internet Exchanges. European exchanges are a very strong position. They've had enough resources to set up their own association called EuroIX, which again does a lot of work helping new exchanges get set up. Another European body, RIPE, that's been around for a long time, has a working group that's specifically dedicated to Internet. Okay, security. I'm not a security expert, but it struck me that this is a topic that's liable to be of interest to this audience. The biggest issue in Internet exchanges is you've got a common, which is basically shared by everybody. Typically it's a single Ethernet, typically it's a single subnet, and when you've got boxes that are under different network management domains that are being connected to that, there's certainly the scope for some interesting things to go wrong. Very early history of Internet exchanges, they would be a dumb hub, or they would even be old-fashioned. I don't know, is there anyone old enough in the room to remember yellow thick Ethernet cable? But the point is that it's a common medium. If you use that kind of technology, it's extremely easy to wiretap, and if you're party C and parties A and B are exchanging traffic, it's very easy to tap into that. Typically, these things are not encrypted. Ethernet switches came along. They made life a whole lot easier, a lot more safer. That's not to say that they don't introduce risks of their own, but clearly Ethernet switching, at least you get away from the wiretapping issue. What are the things that can go wrong at Internet exchange? Broadcast storms are by far the worst. Associated with that, connecting layer 2 switching devices so that the Ethernet switches aren't just owned by the exchange operator, but by third parties as well. Switches don't always do what it says on the tin in terms of switching the traffic to the right port. Broadcast multicast traffic does not scale well. Too much of that and you're in trouble. ARP traffic is a necessary evil that has risks associated with it. There are various evil things that can be done with static routing and mucking about with BGP NICPOP, and also some risks of hijacking the routing resource. Broadcast storms are pure hell. I think I can say that some of the worst hours that I have ever spent in my 20 years of network operations have been caused by layer 2 broadcast storms. And this is basically where somehow a loop gets introduced. Maybe the spanning tree that's supposed to prevent loop detection on a layer 2 Ethernet fabric fails. The broadcast packet just keeps circulating endlessly. A lot of Internet exchanges actually don't use spanning tree precisely because of this. It's not a particularly great protocol. There are proprietary alternatives, but quite often the alternative is you keep one link down and you manually enable it if the other links fail, but otherwise, because you can restore the network more quickly that way than you can repair the damage of a broadcast storm. The single biggest cause of broadcast storms is people connecting their own Ethernet switches, extending the layer 2 topology without you knowing about it, not knowing what they're doing. So it's quite difficult, but it is essential to try and be fairly Stalinistic about what kind of kit people connect and how that interacts with the other kit. But a bad broadcast storm, not only does it shut down the entire IXP and take several hours to recover from that, it also makes root cause determination very difficult. You've got not so much a smoking gun as a smoking file, and it can be quite hard to figure out exactly who caused it. Other problem with broadcast traffic, it doesn't just harm the actual switch fabric. Broadcast packets usually get handled by the CPU and routers, can burn a lot of CPU resource. Not only does that affect the it can affect the BGP process in the router, which causes root flap across the internet. It can have some quite substantial knock-on effects. So